Let's begin to generate the basic structure of our character. We will use the tool that we saw in the last video, that is, the Z-sphere. Well, to generate the basic structure of it, we will create our first Z-sphere. Well, the first thing is to activate the symmetry. And here will be a key point that you must keep in mind. Unfortunately, ZBrush physically gives us no sign of what area we are working on. That is, it doesn't tell us whether we are working on the front or the side. For that, we will use the floor tool. This will give us a guide of what area we are working on. I hope you can see it. Below the Z-sphere we can see a red line. I explained this in the basic course of ZBrush, but basically, in the ZBrush environment there are three axes: X-axis, Y-axis and Z-axis. The X-axis is the horizontal line and is red. The Y is usually green and is the area or the Y-axis. That is this. And the Z, which is blue, here you can see it. It's very difficult, but you can see it. Is the axis of depth or the Z-axis. It is important to check very carefully the axis in which we are working, so that our character is in the correct position. I hope it will not happen to you, but in the past it happened to me that it was sculpting and from one moment to another, when the character was sport, it was backwards or face down. So it's a point I want you to learn to distinguish and fix it. Of course, from the beginning. We already know that this is the X-axis and we are seeing the character from the front. What we could do is go to the document menu, then to Z properties and click on front. In this way ZBrush will assume that that is the front of the character. Okay, now let's continue. We already generated the first Z-sphere to the Z-sphere parent or the Z-sphere root. And this will be the neck. I recommend that the first Z-sphere you are creating belongs to the torso of the character or the hip. Preferably other than the head, as this will help us to speed up the work. Of course, this is just a tip, since it is how I handle it and it worked out well, so I recommend that this be the torso or hip. Then, taking the reference, let's generate the other parts of the body. This will be the chest or rib cage of the character. Now we are going to generate another extra piece that will be the hip. If we hold down Shift when we are creating the Z-sphere, the second Z-sphere we created is going to have the same size as the Z-sphere above. In this case we see that the character has a hip. Although we cannot see it very well, but we can assume that the hip is almost the same size of the chest. So this is a tool that can help us. Let's create the shoulders and let's create the legs. Let's add another Z-sphere here, which will be the elbow. And we will do the same thing with the back legs. We move and create. it doesn't matter that the initial sculpture or the basic sculpture doesn't remain completely perfect as we will expect, because we are going to modify or validate this, and if we do it perfectly from the beginning, we may lose working time. So that's why I recommend you that not worry too much, because the shape is not perfect. Here we have the legs and we have the head. Now let's preview it. It is important that you are doing this very often. Here we can pull this out a little bit more. I will think this is enough, and as you can see, it is very easy to generate a basis with the program. And it is very useful also not to have so many C-spheres, because it will make us much simpler to modify and generate our own base. Always try to make your structure as basic as possible. If it is a very particular case, we can add more C-spheres, but the simpler it may be, the better the result. We can leave it here, and I think this is a good enough base. We can generate traits like the tail, whiskers, and the toes. We could generate them from the same C-spheres, but in this course, we will only generate this structure up to this point, since the other pieces will be generated with other tools. If you archive an object like this, it is enough for this video, because for the next we will use anatomical references to have a better understanding of how should be our character. So see you in the next video.